Welcome back to the Property Strategy Podcast. We are sitting down with Skye Hammer, the co-host of the Melbourne Property Podcast and the director of Convergence Buyers Agents. Skye, it's a pleasure to have you in the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
And I'm really looking forward to this one. We were having a bit of a chat off air about some kind of stories and some anecdotes about your portfolio and some of your investing philosophy. We'll maybe leave off the Pokemon cards and we can maybe touch on that towards the back end. And we'll speak mainly about the obviously the property portfolio side of things as well. So listeners, stay tuned. This one's going to be a bit of fun. But before we dive into your story and the investing philosophy behind the business, do you mind just giving us a little bit of a rundown in terms of who you are, what you do? Kind of touched on the podcast and also the business, but just for our listeners, a little bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Joey. So, obviously, as you mentioned, co-host of the Melbourne Property Podcast and director of Convergence Buyers Agents. So, Convergence Buyers Agents, we're Melbourne-based. We do buy interstate as well, but right now it's all about Melbourne and Geelong. So, we're based both in Melbourne and Geelong at the moment, doing a fair bit of buying there and sharing as much kind of educational insights as we can.
Yeah, beautiful. And the podcast, you enjoying it?
It's good. It's good fun. Yeah. I've been doing it for 18 months now, and obviously you're podcasting yourself now. It's good fun, and I think we get a lot of DMs and questions on our socials. We're pretty active on socials, but I think on the podcast you can answer a lot more questions and a much bigger audience. So
yeah,
it's been good.
Mate, let's get started right into that very first acquisition. I ask every single guest this, but tell us about that very first property purchase. Give us some really high level numbers behind the purchase price. If you remember what the rental yield was, and if we still own it in the portfolio today, what would it be worth?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So interesting purchase, and we can do the side conversation maybe a bit later. But it was purchased in Canberra. So at the time it was an own occupier purchase. Paid $760.
As in you were going to live in it?
Yeah.
Right,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, we were living at the time.
Yep.
I used to be a diplomat, so I had to spend a lot of time in Canberra.
okay.
So I was based in Canberra as a diplomat, lived there for a few years, lived overseas, and kind of play that game back and forth. And then it was a freestanding house where it was kind of like I was in my 20s. It was the same age when people are like, they're off buying units. And I was like, just doesn't sit with me. So I probably got into it later than maybe some friends at the similar age, but was always data driven. So for me, it was buying in an own occupier friendly suburb, one that I didn't want to live in personally, but I knew would do well long term. So again, moving a little bit further out, paid $760, now rents for maybe $850, something like that. So it didn't rent for that, wouldn't have rented for that much back then. Probably worth 1.2, 1.3, I'd say now.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
Yeah, it's good look property. I mean, ACT.
Still hold it?
Still hold it. Yeah. So obviously it's a rental now. We've had it for obviously a few years. ACT land tax obviously is a killer, and I'll probably it'd be one that I'll look to move on at some point.
Oh, so you reckon you will?
I think so. Yeah. Like it's got like granny flat potential and a few other things, but I think when I decide to pull the trigger on a knock here in Melbourne, I think it'll be the one that gets.
That will be
flick.
the one.
Yeah.
That we go to. Just really, really high level, because I found it really, really interesting. Do you mind just giving us a little bit of the backstory behind that purchase?
So I didn't have the perfect property purchasing journey. Like the property ticked all the boxes, happy with it, but it was actually, it was a pretty good educational piece. But it was during like the pre-settlement phase. So trying to get access to the property again, get keys from the agent to go through it, dodging phone calls, agent wouldn't get back to me, getting these really cryptic messages.
How far out from settlement?
Oh, it must have been in the week before, I think, close to. So, and I was like, what is going on? So I called the agent, finally got on to her, and she's like, I can't legally disclose what's happening, but maybe if you Google the vendor's name, you'll find out. So obviously go ahead, front page Canberra Times. It was actually boarded off an AFP officer, and actually been arrested for doing some pretty dodgy stuff, like installing cameras in places you probably shouldn't, and that kind of thing. So he'd been arrested.
In your property?
No, not in our property, thankfully, and in some other properties. But again, like he'd been arrested, no one could get in touch with him. He had the keys. The agent hadn't got the second set of keys or whatever yet. So like we can actually physically get to the property for free settlement. Or worked itself out in the end. But like,
so you still settled on time?
Still settled on time. Still got through the property.
What's the takeaway though? Always Google the vendor's name. I would never have thought to have done that.
Like there is no takeaway, right? I think it's more an example of like shit happens.
Yeah, and shit can happen.
And shit can happen. Like we've had heaps of examples with clients where you're like, okay, we hadn't expected that thing, but this has happened, and now
I was
let's
usually
work
going to
through
ask about like, is there a horror story that you either have for yourself or for a past client, but you almost face it for yourself. But do you have anything spring to mind in terms, not necessarily a horror story, but any kind of anecdote or something interesting that you've had with a client?
Yeah, with a client, it's probably always, I don't know why. Kind of thankfully,
Just you.
It's more personal. I had another one with a personal purchase
happened?
as well. It was actually the first property I bought with a different VA who is a great VA. I think he was maybe early in his career.
Right.
And it was before the property settled. We had to get rid of a heap of shit in the backyard. And I was living overseas at the time, which is why I was using the VA. And he actually just hired a bobcat and got people to dig up all the shit in the backyard before the property had settled.
no.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. So it all worked out fine. It was a developer, we bought it off, and like he didn't care.
He
what was
didn't care,
happening.
but technically trespassing.
But I was like, I wake up to messages. I was living in New York at the time. I'm like, what is happening?
And of all things, a bobcat. Like, wasn't just four blokes in a truck.
Yeah, I was digging some stuff out of the backyard. But
Yeah,
anyway,
wow.
it all happened. But yeah, from a client perspective,
He's gone relatively.
Yeah.
I more mean, like, has anyone come to you with like a Sky bought this property 8 years ago and it's just an absolute lemon? Like, I need to get rid of this. Or
yeah, I mean units. We see that in the units, but like again, nothing drastically wrong, just zero growth. But yeah, nothing really jumps out.
Good. And like you said, probably just as well that it happened to you rather than any of your clients.
Exactly. Yeah, and we've got examples and I guess some stories to pull from.
So just talk to us a little bit about obviously the buyers agency now focusing in on Melbourne and Geelong, like everyone in Australia seems to be right now. So obviously geographically for you, that's really, really fabulous and fortunate. But just overarching, if you could kind of just give us a bit of insight in terms of what your investment philosophy looks like and the typical kinds of portfolios that you would be constructing for your clients. Like, is it predominantly resi based? Are we buying super high end properties? Are we buying the other end of the spectrum? Are we somewhere in between? What does that look like?
Yeah, nice. So I'd say in between. So for me and for our clients, particularly like repeat clients, I'm the ugly duckling. I'm looking for that ugly duckling. So for us, it's having, and we're buying a few different markets where we build that team out where it's like, look, this house we buy a lot of off market, like 80-90% off market, and a lot of it's long-term rentals. The current owner has given it no love and they don't want to take it to market because it's not worth staging because it just doesn't present well. The tenants are still in there, all that kind of stuff. So it's buying below market value where we can, like we'll pay market value if we have to, but then being able to do a 15, 20K reno and then get that valuation.
And when are we doing that? Like as soon as we possibly can?
Yeah. Sometimes if we're super lucky, getting that written into the contract and basically getting early access to the property. Generally speaking, it's day one after settlement.
Or waiting for leases to expire. Or
that kind of stuff
like
as well. Yeah. So we'll see variations of it. Some of it's you can find tenants happy, you don't have to do anything now, but in 1-3 years time, whenever the tenant moves out, we can generate equity through updating a bathroom, flooring, painting, all that
stuff. Is that the play? Is it the play to then increase the value of the property, or is it to increase the rental yield, or both?
Yeah, both. Yeah, generally most of our clients, it's more of a like equity and capital growth play. I'd say most of our clients are interstate on pretty good incomes, usually come to us with maybe 1 or 2 properties, but then looking to expand that to like a 5 property portfolio or something like that. So they're not necessarily chasing yield on that purchase. It's like running out of equity, or I want to do this. I've got changes in my life circumstances, changing jobs. So let's go aggressive while we can, and then maybe pivot later. Are
you seeing that there's some kind of like resistance, or like people are unaware or shocked in terms of the rental yield when you show them the out-of-pocket costs?
I think we're lucky because we're known for buying property in Melbourne and Geelong. If you're looking to buy property in Melbourne and Geelong, you're confident whack on going to get in the bottom of the growth cycle and kind of go over that.
What about, do you have anything to, because obviously that other thing when you think of it with respect to anywhere in Victoria, people say, oh, the land tax. Is there like do you have a counter argument that you would usually say? What is that to those investors?
Yeah, so for us, it's pretty straightforward because we did the whole buying in WA, buying in Queensland, all that type of stuff. And for a lot of our clients, we bought a lot of property in Townsville where we were paying significant for rates, insurance, that type of thing. 700K purchase in both. If you run the numbers, the holding costs are less in Melbourne. So the land tax, maybe $1,800, $2,000, but then you factor in $1,200 for insurance versus $3,000 or $4,000, you kind of made it up straight away. Okay. So if you're spending $2 million on an investment property in Melbourne, completely different story. But we don't really spend more than 1-1, I would say. When we spend $1 million and below is exclusive where we're buying investment properties here at the moment.
Yeah, right. Okay. And just on average, what are you kind of seeing as a rental yield?
3.8 to 4.1. Yeah. We're probably in that space. If we're buying kind of higher, maybe sometimes 3.5, and if we're lucky, we've got close to 5% a few times. Oh, wow. Yeah, on like 800-900K purchases, but it's again very opportunistic.
And in terms of like the typical client that would come to you, is it about this buy and hold approach? We kind of mentioned come in, we'll do a bit of a value add to get that bit of increase in equity and maybe a bit of a rental income increase at the same time. But is there a longer term play in terms of, are we doing other types of value add? Is it simply just accumulate as many assets as you possibly can. What's the long-term philosophy for you guys?
The best one, it's generally granny flat play would be the most common. Subdivision, like some people come to us and say, I want subdivision potential. I was like, well, are you actually going to subdivide it or is it just a nice to have? And like, no, I want to do it. I was like, well, why are we buying your person name? Like, let's set up the right structure to do that. And then it's like, oh, maybe I don't actually want to do it.
Yeah. It's just nice to say that it has it.
So we kind of clear that up at the start to make sure the strategy is actually aligned, and obviously working with game plans is a big part of that. But for most people now, because the yield does suck in Melbourne, it's potential for granny flat. So
what does that look like though? Like, does it need to be like, is it a block size of minimum X, and does that change council by council?
Yeah, so Victoria's quite different. So New South Wales, lots of other places are doing thousands of granny flats a year. In Victoria, it's only been in the last couple of years where they've changed the process. So we used to have this thing called DPU, which was a bit different to granny flats. And what they were was essentially a granny flat, but you couldn't rent them out separately. Generally had to be with like someone in the house and all that kind of stuff. Whereas they changed that, obviously, to fight the affordability and housing crisis. So I work with a guy, he's the granny flat king, if you want to look him up on social media. And so we work with him quite closely, and he does the full FISO for us. So before we're buying, we're getting the sites done, FISO done, the numbers run. So we know, look, even if you don't go and want to build that granny flat tomorrow, we know that 12 months, 5 years time, you can go and do that based on the current kind of policies and regulations.
What does that cost you on average right now? Is it like $500,000, 100 grand?
I'd say 200, and that's like a kind of higher end finish. So like if we're buying in a kind of premium suburb or a nice suburb, that's what we're spending. Again, you can probably get down to 180 if you want to kind of.
What are we getting? 2 beds?
2 beds, 1 bath. Yep. Yeah, 450-ish per week rent. But that's kind of.
Are we finding that clients are funding that in cash, equity, both?
Equity, yeah. So for most that we're buying them for, we're saying, we know it's got that potential. Don't fork out that extra cash. Go buy another property with that cash right now if you can, if you've got the borrowing capacity to do so. But when things get tight or when you want that uplift, then use equity to fund that.
To fund that, and hopefully equity in that property that you would
exactly, and that's what it is, right? Yeah, so we're basically saying let that house generate enough equity to fund its own granny flat.
Yeah, beautiful. And so we're coming in, we've bought these couple of acquisitions, we've maybe then come back and put granny flats on them. I always like to ask this question as well, and everyone has their own kind of individual take on it. If you've got the property, and maybe you've kind of answered it, if you've got the property and it's granny flat-able, would you rather buy more properties and then do the value add, or would you rather buy a house, build granny, then go and buy the next house?
Yeah, 99% of the time it's buy a house with granny flat potential and then go buy another house if you can. And I like to push the granny flat thing when you want to kind of pivot to income, or if there's something with borrowing capacity, one partner might go on maternity leave, something like that. That's when that kind of makes a bit more sense. There is the exception though, like I got a doctor client at the moment. She wants to reduce her hours, and so we're buying kind of one quickly now because her borrowing capacity is about to drop, and she's going to chuck a granny flat on straight away. Yeah, so and that's to boost her income.
And is there? So we've kind of said that formula there in terms of make these acquisitions, then come back and do the value add play at a later point in time. But is there ever a world where you would see a different style of asset class make sense for an individual?
Yep, all the time. And I think it's some of the sessions we do with yourself, and then that kind of pivots the strategy. So obviously commercial is one option. For most clients, we're saying go out, let's go buy the resi portfolio, build that out, and then let it do its thing for maybe one growth cycle, and then potentially in the future pivot to commercial. But for others, commercial might make sense earlier.
Yeah.
High risk tolerance, already have an existing portfolio. That's where I guess that would change.
Is there a world where you see like that just stay in the resi space?
Not forever.
Okay.
Why? Because it doesn't work. Right? I mean, it could technically work, but like, why wait 20 years if you can pivot and have the same outcome in 10 years, right?
And we've spoken about some of the downfalls, right? And obviously the most common one would be things like vacancy within the commercial space.
Yep.
Any other kind of major pitfalls that you would usually see in that type of asset class?
Yeah, I think it's just the base. Like, and as we mentioned, like, let's say you go out and buy that 1.2 commercial up front with no resi base. Worst case scenario, tenant moves out, you can't fill it for 3 or 6 months. You've just got nothing to sell off or buffer or release equity to kind of sustain yourself. And then you're selling it off probably at a loss at that point if you've lost a decent tenant. And I think if I've got 1 or 2 resi properties as a buffer first, I think it just makes a bit more sense.
Someone asked me this question on, I don't remember what platform it was on some social media platform. If you had 1.5 mil of cash, how would you deploy that right now, starting out? Let's say, for example, you inherited it.
Yep.
Ask the question around, would you go and buy a $1.5 million asset outright in cash? Would you go and buy two $750,000 assets? Would you put the 1.5 mil as multiple deposits on multiple investment properties? What would you do right now? You being like a younger investor, like let's say if you were 50, maybe a different story, but if you were a younger investor.
I'd say depending on obviously borrowing capacity will limit whatever it sets. But if we've got a bit of free range in that space, then obviously splitting out 1.5 and building out the biggest asset base possible, probably across resi and commercial, if that's the kind of inherited.
Is there I wouldn't buy less than this in the resi space? Like I wouldn't spend 300 grand for argument's sake.
So for us, like as I said, we've bought that for 600K place in the past. Like there are some options still out there, but it's getting pretty dire and it's the most congested market segment, I would say. Like there's some huge investors just buying up every single property that comes both on and off market. And like I've seen some of it because we've had clients maybe start with someone and speak to us afterwards. And I'm like, okay, I mean, sure. But when you've got to buy 40, 50 properties a month, like there is going to be a point where like the quality drops off. So we're not in that space. We're probably the cheapest we'd spend now would be probably 600. And that'd be 3 better in Geelong on a good size block.
Yeah. So somewhere in between that 6 and 1 million.
6 to 1 mil is probably where we do most of our buying.
That's sweet spot range. Why wouldn't we go and spend all of that upfront in cash? Like, why wouldn't you just go and spend 3 or 2, say 2 750K properties in cash?
Yep, just leverage. So again, it's kind of what we spoke about. And again, game plans, I think this is the best example to plug into game plans as well, where it's like 1.5 cash, go buy that. Let's say you're just on a 100K a year salary. You've now got two positively assets. It's going to boost you up. You're going to be at a higher tax rate, particularly early on. Whereas if you kind of have, and we had this conversation with a client recently who wanted to buy a 750 outright with cash. I was like, you could, or we could spread that across a couple. There's a high income earner as well. That's why they had the cash just kind of sitting there. I was like, well, let's do that. You're going to get some of the negative gearing benefits. You're also going to double your asset base. And so you can be at 50% LVR, but in 5-10 years time, the outcome's going to be significantly different as well as the kind of benefits up front.
I wonder if it's just like something psychological for some people going, I just don't want to have a level of debt behind me or... Have you come across individuals like that? Like obviously you mentioned that you had one of those clients. Was it the fact that he had a loan but paid it down?
Yeah. So he had that and he just saved away. And it was that kind of classic analysis paralysis. Like could tell you everything about every market across Australia, but hadn't really
executed.
And a high income earner, so the cash just kind of kept building up in the bank account. But it's funny you say that. We've had a chat about this off air, or maybe it was on the Melbourne Property Podcast, but we spoke about how like the difference between like younger generations now and the older generation. So what I've kind of picked up the most is that older generation, debt is bad. It's the most horrific thing in the world. And they were taught by their parents and they were probably taught in school. Who knows what they taught back then. But like we speak to a lot of people in their 50s who now have a $3 million PPOR fully paid off. And now they're reaching out saying, oh shit, should probably buy an investment property. Or what do I do with all this?
I'm relying on the pension and whatever savings I can scrap up between now and when I retire.
So they've obviously got super, and some people, again, their super balances aren't great because super is a lot better now than it used to be, even before it didn't even exist. So they're now trying to go buy those income producing assets. Whereas the kind of younger generation, I'd say like in their 20s, early 30s that we speak to, they have no interest in buying their own home because they can't afford to do so, but they own 2, 3, 4 investment properties. So we're saying the Great Australian Property Dream has changed. Like it's not only about PPOR, it's about building out a portfolio. So people have different views on that, but I think the education, people have access to podcasts like this one, obviously just TikTok, Instagram. There's as much as the baby boomers might kind of shit on it, it's actually setting themselves up way better for a time and they're just being lucky with a PPOR purchase.
Let's dive into it because a couple of things, and I already know your opinion. So let's firstly air that. So owner occupier or rent vesting, and why?
Rent vesting, yeah. So I guess different cities are completely different, but like here in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, all very similar.
Pretty much any capital city, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like rent where you want to live and buy the best investment property you can get. And at some point, sure, you want to kind of maybe pivot to PPOR. I've got a wife and 2 kids and I'm still renting. Particularly if you get to a point where you've got a portfolio behind you, you kind of move up. You're not in the sub $500 a week rent, but you can go out and get a rental. I think I'm paying $880 a week for what's probably a $2 million house right now. You can do a 2-year lease. You can almost turn it into a commercial type lease. You're not like every 12 months you're worried about getting kicked out. You can do a 5-year lease if you want to. So you have that security.
Have you had security?
Yeah, yep. And but we have security, but like my wife and I, as I said, we used to be diplomats.
Yes.
We lived around, we move all the time.
Yeah,
Like it's just ingrained in us that
True,
like
actually.
it's almost like
yeah.
I don't want to be stuck
We
here.
need to move.
Yeah, I want to be able to move. Like we'll probably spend some time in Queensland, the Gold Coast at some point.
Well, that's really interesting because I had a conversation with someone about this as well, and like they were very similar in like if I'm in one place for more than like 3 or 4 years, I get like the urge to go. Yeah. And then you're talking about sure, if you got a gain, the owner occupier will be CGT exempt, but you still got like your stamp duty on the way in, you got your marketing fees, you got your sales costs. It's still like a 10% of the property value is caught up in transactional fees. If you consider stamps, BA fees, whatnot, 6% on the way in and 3% on the way out, even if there is no CGT, it's like a costy exercise versus paying a removalist.
Yeah, to move your stuff.
A couple of $1,000 to move your stuff every few years.
Yeah. Completely agree. Like it's one of those things. Like again, for us, it's more of a mindset thing. Like we have lived overseas. We've lugged our golden retriever. He's now 8 or 9. He's lived in multiple countries. We spent a house deposit to get him to and from the US when we used to live over there. Like it's insane how much he's traveled, but like it's just who we are. Like it's kind of we like that flexibility.
But, so you said you're pro rent vesting, but you did mention twice now potentially a future owner occupier.
Yeah. There'll be a time when I want to buy a PPOR, and that's when I can sell down a couple of investment properties, probably have like a 50% LVR or something like that. But there's no way right now. Like what I want now is maybe 2 or 3 mil. Yeah. I'm not going to go do a 20% deposit and do that, and because it's just going to kill the borrowing capacity and our quality of life will just change overnight.
And so you would liquidate some of the existing portfolio.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, we already mentioned, right? We mentioned the property in Canberra might go.
Yeah, they're probably the first one to get the flick.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so what's the thought process? Just to try and get the LVR to a certain percentage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Buy the dream house, happy where it is. Again, right now it's most likely Melbourne, but that could change in time as well. So it's more just having that flexibility that when I want to pull the trigger, we're not paying or caught in that kind of rat race of just having a huge mortgage and then completely having to change everything else that we do.
Very interesting. So so you can be pro rent vesting, but still have your aspirations, and they can change as well.
Yep, exactly. And we've got clients who are the same. And we did a session recently with a client who, couple in Sydney, their house wants to be $3 million, like what they want. So they're buying investment properties to get them there. They can't save their way there. So they're aggressively building out the the portfolio, and we had to model out.
That's a very good session.
Yeah, it's like when do we get to the point where they sell down and get their
the
PPOR, which again with a lower kind of LVR on it.
Or even like I think for them, we actually got them to the point where they were maybe even potentially selling their entire portfolio to fund the owner occupier outright.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's fine because your goals can change, right? You might have the idea around wanting $150,000 of passive income and not giving a rat's about your potential owner occupier, but then 10 years later on, you're like, well, I don't really care about the cash flow anymore. All I want is that $4 million owner occupier, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's okay for the client's journey and story to change. But we were chatting about this on the Melbourne Property Podcast with respect to coming out there and doing that first.
Yeah.
And buying up front and jumping straight into that owner occupier. What do you see with clients on the ground here that do that or that think about doing that? Or what are the pitfalls of doing that?
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's the example. We're working with one of the AFL teams here to educate their players on maybe build out a portfolio when you're like, so, and this is going a little bit off topic, but they usually have about 5 years on a list. And like the AFL Players Association have done all the research, and that when they go out, like the financial stress, the kind of the mental
on the other side of it,
on the other side of it is massive. And because they lose their identity as a player, but let's say, and this is to answer your question, I'm getting there, like they bought a $1.5 million house, they were on $250, $350 a year, and that was fine. And then that dries up. They retire, they lose their AFL identity, and they also then lose the house they lived in the last 5 years because they can no longer afford the mortgage repayments.
Because the repayments are still the same. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So like,
what are they doing then? Selling it?
Well, yeah, they must. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to avoid, that scenario. And it's, instead of doing that, go rent this amazing house you want, and let's go build your portfolio
that
in the background.
Fits your lifestyle at that point in time. And then when you're no longer at
the
top of your peak career, you might go and rent something a little bit more.
Exactly. So making it more sustainable, still having the nice looking house that you can go rent and fit in and feel like you've got to fit in. But yeah, in the back end, you're setting yourself up financially. Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting, and very interesting to hear within that kind of lens and that kind of generic avatar that we're talking about there with the AFL player. But I imagine it would be obviously typical of anyone, right? You could be in a high income earning job and you might lose that tomorrow. And then all of a sudden this owner occupier that you worked so hard for, you potentially need to liquidate because you have no other assets behind you, which, like you mentioned, you could potentially sell off 1 or 2 to help lower your loan position and make the repayments a little bit more comfortable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mate, just thinking outside of the box, we've touched on value add, we've touched on, in terms of like a cosmetic reno, we've touched on granny flats. Are there any other strategies that you see people employ in terms of scaling their portfolio out?
Yes, I mean, like personally, like development's the kind of the next one. So
Okay.
I'm doing a 1 into 3 development up in Newcastle at the moment.
That's
So like
exciting.
it's headaches, right? Like
Okay.
it sounds exciting, but yeah, dealing with permitting and all that kind of stuff can be a bit of a headache.
Where are
So
we now? What stage?
all approved.
Okay,
You know,
beautiful.
Time to knock down and
Oh,
do
wow.
some building. So we'll see how that one plays out.
This year,
So
will you start?
hopefully, yeah, that's the plan. So that's the plan. We've got a tenant in place and that kind
And
of
then
stuff.
what? Keep them all? Sell
Probably
some?
sell. Yeah, probably
All?
sell. Maybe not all, but yeah, we'll see what that looks like.
There's your own
Yeah.
occupied purchase, actually.
Potentially, yeah. We'll see when the interest rates have kind of stayed out and that market to pick up a bit more.
Okay,
But,
interesting. So that one, there's a really viable play.
yeah, yep. So there's that. But to be honest, when we see more, it's playing the numbers game. So we've had a few clients where we're basically playing the banks off each other and buying for X and getting a value day one and pulling equity out straight away.
Not doing anything.
Not doing anything. Like, for example, we bought a house in Frankston, 2-bedder, 800 square meter block, 600K, got a val done 750 1 month later, and they're pulling equity out and he's going again. So we played that game with with the same client now. We're about to buy property number 4 and he hasn't put any more money down.
But so obviously you're not doing this yourself because you must have a strategic broker that you're working
Correct.
with.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. So before we're buying, we're like, just can you check in the back end, what are these bells looking like?
Before actually signing a contract.
Yeah. So like that is the strategy. And again, there's risk involved in that. Client's fully aware, like this client in particular, just to really kind of go get a client in his 20s.
Doesn't
that
suit
kind of
everyone.
stuff. Doesn't suit everyone. And it's a high risk play for some. Like if that they'll drop to 600, then we've got this 600K property. So it's probably worth 700 now, actually, as opposed to the 750 val we got like last year. So that's more common. So I think getting in there, getting those vals done, like working with a broker, because we've got those relationships with a few brokers who know we'll look after them, because a lot of clients come to us with brokers and the last thing they want to hear is, hey, we're looking to do a refinance. You're going to get clawback straight away. Yeah. So it is playing that kind of longer game. So yeah, we've done that, I guess, for a few clients now, which has been good.
That's a really, really interesting one. I just want to pick your brain a little bit more on the subdivision play, because we kind of mentioned that people come to you thinking that it's what we want to do. It sounds sexy and the uplift sounds fabulous. Just talk us through some of the not so great parts of going through it yourself with your 1 into 3.
Yeah, it's council, I'd say, would be the big one. So the issue we had and why it kind of dragged on for longer is working through the permitting process or the PA process in New South Wales. Got a fair way along. They wanted more information. There's a bit of a slope to the block, which is kind of why we like it, because it's elevated, but also adds to obviously the planning, I guess, complexities. Person at the council quit. Had to wait for someone new to come in. So like just stuff you don't predict, right? And so that was a month or two delay just in that itself, that to hire someone to then restart, then we play the game again.
Why do you have all the horror stories yourself?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's kind of lucky, right? It's like, why do I like property? Like, it's just a headache. But yeah, so just stuff like that just comes along. You don't expect it. Yeah, the costs blow out because obviously development costs do these days, as they do. So, and that's all before we've knocked the house down and turned dirt. So so not for everyone. But again, we do help clients do it. Particularly, I've got a client who's maybe 10 or 13 properties, I think he's at now. We didn't buy all of them for him, but we've bought him probably 3 now. And one of them was the subdivision play. So again, actually down in Frankston North, 600K we bought the house for, got a val of 720, I think, straight after settlement. And he just basically pulled that out and he's used that to fund the development at the back. So he's doing that now, getting a plan drawn up, all that kind of stuff. So again, you need to have those like relationships with town planners and everything. We're doing those checks before we buy. But he was a genuine, I want to subdivide, as opposed to some that come to us and say, I want to subdivide, but then they like the potential that maybe the thought of doing it in the future.
Yeah. And are you seeing that, like, I mean, you don't necessarily have to have 13 properties, but are people coming with that level of sophistication before they're even considering something like that for the most part?
I'd say like people with one investment property are already talking about subdivision. And again, it's the information aid, and you can open TikTok and you're seeing someone do a subdivision.
150.
Yeah, and we work with a few developers, and we do have a developer client who's in that space, and he teaches other people how to do it. So we also source development sites. So we know what to look for. But again, there's not much to look for in buying it, but also having the right client that's actually maybe ready to take on that project.
And actually start it. Much more work on your end?
A bit, yeah. But again, like a lot of it, like we have relationships with town planners and all that. So they're the ones doing the work, and obviously we refer them business and that type of thing. So it's not usually in-house as much. There's obviously our due diligence and the checks we work through, but then there's that next stage. And
I'm going to change topic altogether, and
sure.
let's talk about, because we spoke about changing asset class in terms of maybe the shift towards commercial property, but in terms of yourself personally, I found this was really interesting as well. Shifting asset classes up. Talk to us about your journey, and I'm not dissing on shares or ETFs or anything like that as well, because I actually find that asset class very interesting as well, and obviously has made people plenty of cash. But talk to us about your journey through shares, and this we were just chatting about this off air, particularly when you first started.
I don't know why I shuffled in. Like, it was like, you're going to ask me something, I get intense. I was like, what are we spoken about? So I've been investing since I was 16, not in property, but in shares. And so 16th birthday, my mum tells a story at my wedding, or 21st, wherever it was. But I was 16, I said I wanted financial advice. So come from relatively humble beginnings.
Were you working?
I was working, what was it? I would have been at Subway.
And like $9 an hour?
Yeah. $9 an hour, and packing shelves. I got poached by the bottle shop next door to work on at a high rate. They had penalty rates and stuff. I was like, oh, that sounds way better. I did that. Come from pretty humble beginnings. My mum was a nurse. My dad was a painter. And they bought one investment property, and it obviously did really well. But then they kind of just stopped there, and you could see like what could have happened. They could have gone and bought more of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So wanted financial advice, went down to like a financial advisor. It was a friend of a friend. I started buying like top 20 ASX shares, and this is, we're talking $1,000 or $2,000 I think I had in at the time. Lo and behold, it was 2 months before the GFC. So watching my little portfolio grow, GFC hits just straight down. And like a lot of lessons to obviously take away from that. Dollar cost averaging being one of them. And so it was like, okay, going in there. It's halved. Essentially, I think the portfolio probably halved. But then obviously buying back in and building up, and over a few years, you're thinking, oh, that was actually the perfect time to buy. Bought a heap of stuff that obviously increased in value.
So you didn't sell up everything at that point in time?
Oh, mate, it wasn't much to sell. Probably could have bought a
just how demoralizing to a 16-year-old guy to be like, I've worked so hard for this cash and I've just seen it all go.
Yeah. But then again, at the time, like I don't remember being hurt or annoyed. Like, but it was when you have your password and stuff, you log into your portfolio and you can see just
the red or the green.
The red, just the lot of red. But then a bit more like determined. I was like, I'm just gonna keep buying this stuff. I had some.
That's really like dedicated though to go to push through and see. So many people just go, I'm never touching this ever again.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I think the other takeaway, like this is over time, was just leverage with property. If I was highly leveraged in that scenario, game over. And so like people do that and they pull out equity, you can buy shares, or you can kind of obviously margin lending, that kind of thing. You can do that if you want. But like I've never done that in shares. Property, I sleep perfectly well at night.
Someone's not going to come up with a big sign and say your house is now worth this. Yeah, tomorrow it's now worth that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, no, I probably check my portfolio daily, which out of just personal interest and what's happening in the market. But like with shares, that can happen. You can get completely wiped out. Like I essentially got wiped out with no kind of lending, but again, just kind of tucked away at it and I kind of built it back up, and eventually sold shares, moved into property as a deposit, and then kind of haven't really looked back for shares from then. Yeah,
very, very fascinating story. And we were having that chat off air, and I was like, no, I need to edit it to make sure this is it. Mate, just so in kind of wrapping things up, if we could come back to that kind of one overarching philosophy in terms of something that you could tangibly give the listeners in terms of, okay, this is what we do in terms of our investment philosophy. Is there a mantra? Is there something that you kind of abide by? Is there buy as many properties as you possibly can? Is there something that you usually would impart in your clients that you're working with?
Yeah, it'd probably just be don't buy that bright and shiny, like whether it's house land package or something that looks just nice. A lot of our clients come to us and they've still got their own occupier hat on when they're buying their first investments. It's like, I don't like the color of that wall. I don't like these tiles in the kitchen. I was like, I don't even see they had tiles in the kitchen. Like I don't care about that. That's what's going to make. I'm not going to help you achieve your goals. So for us, it's don't be scared of those ugly ducklings. Like there's some structural stuff you can't really get it past. But if you need to spend 5 10 grand up front, but you're making 20, 30, 50 grand equity on the way in, those numbers look pretty good to me. So for me, I'm always a deal hunter. Like I don't have a flashy car, don't have flashy clothes. I still remember the first time I went live on TikTok and I had a $3 shirt from Kmart on and someone spotted it. I don't know how.
No, they didn't.
Like, is that a $3 Kmart
Come
shirt?
on.
And this is the first time I went live and I was like getting heckled. And I was like, never doing this again. But again, like I couldn't care less about that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I'd rather put that money into property, investments, that type of thing.
So things that don't work for you.
Yeah. So it's not all about the glamour. I think it's more about kind of, as long as the numbers make sense.
Well, it's even like what you're just saying there. That just sums up delayed gratification to me anyway.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Mate, where can my listeners find out more? Where can we get in contact with you, where can we hear you on the sound waves?
Yeah, maybe Melbourne Property Podcast. Just Google that, head over to our Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, go check that one out. And then Convergence Buyers Agents. On socials, I'm on TikTok, Instagram.
In his Kmart shirt?
My Kmart shirt. Yeah, that was a huge learning. You learn to deal with that kind of crap.
It was alive.
It was alive.
It was coming at you straight away. Did you talk to it or not?
It just rattled me. I just looked at it and I was like, what do I say? Trying to talk about whatever it was. But I love lives. I do TikTok lives quite regularly. I don't think I was the first, but I was one of the first to kind of do them. And I like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, people in bed, have a listen to me waffle on about the Melbourne property market.
So is that where people can listen to you live?
Yeah, probably TikTok.
And searching what?
Skyhammer. Should come up. Yeah.
Wonderful. Mate, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Looking forward to the next conversation.
Awesome. Cheers, Joey. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate.